My name's Jeff St Laurent. This is the Tuesday live show, and I'm excited to present to my Selling Coaching Nation today's topic, which is going to be all about setting up speaking engagements. Speaking engagements, by far, bar none, hands down, are one of, I was not say the only way, but one of the best ways to get coaching clients. And I would say it's the most direct way to get a coaching client in my experience. And that's from doing face-to-face live events for even within the fitness industry for 20 plus years, including my coaching career, but just in my coaching career as a full-time coach, I've been doing live events. I did them for 12 plus years. And that's now also having done completely virtual online only for the past 5 years as well. And I would still say that face-to-face live events are the most direct way and one of the, if not the best ways to get coaching clients. So I'm going to talk briefly some of the strategies and tips that I've learned over the years to kind of help you make your speaking engagements more successful. And it's not just profitability, but it's also getting people in the seats. So we're going to talk about that today. I do record all of these Tuesday live shows, and I put them in my university at sellingcoaching.com. So please check that out. I help coaches transition to a full-time business. So I've got a ton of great resources there for you that are fully available to you. And especially you can start off with right on the homepage at sellingcoaching.com is my free resource. It's an audio training course. Essentially, it's launching your full-time coaching business, the first 3 vital steps. So if you enter your name and email address, that will give you instant access to that. And that's also going to put you in my email community, and it's going to allow you to get regular emails on me on a weekly basis, not only to get some great information to help you transition to full-time, but it's also going to show you how I utilize and stay in touch with my email community, one of our most valuable assets in our business. Now, let's talk speaking engagements, right? And I'm going to talk live speaking engagements today. So I'm not going to talk about speaking engagements like this. This is a speaking engagement. And one of the things that I like to do with my mentor coaching clients, if you were to hire me as your mentor coach, whether I do one-on-one or with group, wherever we were working together, one of the things I love to do is help you set up live events like this, like virtual live events on a weekly basis to practice your speaking. And it's not only to build a library, to stay in touch in front of your audience and stay in front of your audience as well, but it's more importantly than anything, especially in the beginning, is to develop and hone your message, get comfortable speaking in a live format right now, just like this. Even if there's no one watching, that's okay. It's still a live broadcast, and it's just like you're on stage, whether there's 5 people, 500 people, or 0 people. It's important practicing that. Now, it's important to practice that because whether you're doing live events or not, at some point you want to do live events. It doesn't matter who you are. Doing live events is an important component to it. So the virtual space is nice for practice, but then when it comes time to setting up speaking engagements, that's definitely a way to do it. So let's talk about some of the, I'm not going to go like heavy in depth on, start and use top to finish. I do that with my mentor coaching clients, helping them work through every single step. But I want to kind of highlight some of the tips and strategies along the way to help you be more successful with this today. And so we want to start off when we think about a speaking engagement is understanding the reason I say it's the most direct path. And this is important to understand because doing an event is a lot of work. That's the bottom line. And it's not so much the content. In fact, it really has nothing to do with the content. And initially, your biggest fear about setting up a speaking engagement is probably thinking about, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? No matter how long or short the event is, what am I going to talk about? What's the content? That's typically the biggest fear and where you feel our work is. However, the work really has nothing to do with content. You'll figure that out. If you get an event in a couple hours, you'll figure it out. It doesn't matter how much stress happens between now and when you figure it out, you'll figure it out. The biggest challenge of setting up events is actually putting people on the seats. That will and always will be the biggest challenge for any speaker or company or organization doing an event is putting people in the seats. That's going to be your challenge. I'll address that today. But in the meantime, and we want to think about and we want to understand why it's so important, why it's the most direct path, as I say, to getting clients, because the more you understand this, at least from my experience and logically, it's going to help keep you going as you approach that, if you will, that wall of that challenge of getting people in the seats. Because when you do that and it's hard and nothing's happening or it's not working out or you're not getting as many people as you wanted to, you need to understand the why and know that keep going down this path because it's a great path for you. And in a basic summary is that essentially when you're doing, and I compare it to online because a lot of people are just like, oh, I'll say that they're hiding online, right? If they even get online from behind the scenes, but once they get themselves out there, they're doing a social media post. They're doing maybe if they'll write an email, but they're doing these social media posts and they're doing a quote and success is another step in a series of steps, or, but they're not really putting themselves out there, and they're like, well, nothing's happening and no one's responding. And online, even though you're getting some exposure, it's also a convenient way to hide, because unless you've really dialed in, narrowed down your niche, and you can find where those people are, doing marketing online can be very like a lot of waste of time unless you're really dialed in. And then you need to be very consistent and you need to be very visible. And whether it's doing free stuff and or paid ads, it's absolutely viable, absolutely. But again, we've got to find that market, and we've got to have the consistency with it, and a barragement of it on a consistent basis, and great lead capture and great follow-up as well. But when you compare that to face-to-face, let's just say we get past the work of getting people in the seats and we get 5 people in a room. And I would be willing to bet anybody out there, you in this next week, whatever day it is now, I'm doing my last Tuesday event, but it's Tuesday. If you were to set up an event for this coming Sunday, now forget about what you're doing between now and then, or if you're busy or not, let's just say you have the day open. If you were to set something up, a local event at a Panera Bread, let's say, and I'd be willing to bet that you could easily get 5 people in the seats. Scratch that. I'm not going to say easily, but I know for a fact you could get 5 people to come. I don't care whether you have to beg them. I don't care if it was your parents and your brother and your sister and your best friend. Like you could get 5 people in the seats. And at a minimum, that's what I'm talking about there. And you're like, well, Jeff, why would I want to do that? Why would I have, my family come, or my friends, all these people that I know? They're not going to be my potential clients. Well, number one, how do you know that? Number two, you don't know who they know, or what they'll say, or what they'll learn from that, or who they could bring, right? So in other words, you can get 5 people in the seats if you were to have an event, this coming Sunday, whatever, what's that, 5 days from now, right? You could do it. And you don't have to pay for an event place. You could do it at a Panera Bread. You could do it at the local library. You can find some other spots to do it at. You could do it at a Starbucks. And yeah, maybe it's loud, whatever. Yeah, you sit down at a table with 2 or 3 people, but you could do it. And that's a fact. And the reason why that's the direct path is because when you're doing other modes, especially like online, you're not right in front of people. Like there are people that are watching this now live. There are people that will be watching this recording, right? But they're not in front of me where I can look them in the eye and I could shake their hand and I can talk to them before or after the event. There's something different there that you can only get from a live event. And that's an important component to it, because you can have a conversation with somebody. You can find out what their motivation was for coming to that, based on the topic. What are they going through in their world right now where this topic was of interest to them? Same question after the event. What was the biggest takeaway? What are you going through in your world right now with this information and this content resonated with you? Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm curious, with X, when you say you're going after X right now, tell me a little bit more about how important that is to you. Why is now the right time for you to do something like that? What's different today than over the past, 6 months or 8 months or 12 months that you've been wanting to do this? What makes today different? That makes you feel like you can do something about it. I want to do something about it now. We can have those questions. We can have that back and forth conversation. We can build rapport. We can build trust. And it happens like this. And I'm not saying it always happens instantly, but when you're vulnerable, when you're yourself, when you give a great presentation, people can connect with you. It lessens the time to connect with somebody and trust somebody and build that rapport. Doesn't mean you can't create that online right now. Like I can create a live event like this and people can feel connected with me. But when I hit stop and end broadcast, it's like I go away, you go away, and there's no interaction, right? And I'm solely relying on me having that person know who that person is, if they liked or commented or said something, and then I can reach out and I can create a conversation. But a lot of people aren't great at that stuff, and I teach that stuff. I teach how to create those kind of connections, but it's different when you're face-to-face. So that's one of the main reasons is why they're so great in terms of getting clients and building that audience and building that trust and rapport more instantly. The live face-to-face speaking engagements is because you can have that, that shake the hands, look people in the eye type of thing. And you can ask those questions that I was just going over right there. And that can lead to furthering up, following up, and that can lead to qualifying someone, offering a complimentary session, and having a client. That's a big thing. So when we talk about setting up speaking engagements, I'll just say it like this. There's two main speaking engagements. One speaking engagement is one where you have the place, in other words, you have the location, and you are hosting the event and you're inviting people to it. That, as I said, is always going to be our biggest challenge, is getting people in the seats. Now, on the other side, the other type of an event is an event where someone's hosting it for you. Maybe there's an office and they have 5 employees, and you're going to go there to do a lunch and learn or after work for 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and the 5 employees are going to be there. In other words, they take care of the location. They have the people. You show up and do your thing. Now, of the two, which one would I prefer? Well, I would prefer to have you and myself as well. If we were going to set something up, I would prefer to have the latter, meaning someone who already has a space that wants you to come in and you're showing up and the people are already there. Because obviously that kind of is the loophole to getting rid of our biggest challenge with setting up events, is just getting people in the seats. If we can find someone who already has an audience that willing to host it and has people that they could put in the seats for you, that saves a lot of your time and effort. Now you just focus on delivering a great course, great product, great content, and then following up from there. So that's a great way to avenue to go do it. But I wouldn't ignore setting up your own events and hosting them as well, right? So I would take down both paths. I would start taking a look at, who do you know? Who is, who has a space that you can use? Who can I connect with? Who would be willing to have me come in to speak to their audience? Absolutely. So that's one avenue to go down. But I would also take a serious look at where could you start with your own events. When I started this off, I did some of those, but my very first event was, I just did it on my own, and I found a space to do. And one of my personal training clients knew this guy, and he had some real estate stuff, and he had a really nice meeting space in this beautiful building with glass windows, and it was really great stuff. And he's like, I'll let you use a room for $25. And the alternative was some free spaces. And I didn't really like the location of them, things like that. So for $25, I'm like, you know what, let me do this. And I charged for the event. I charged $25 a head for my first event. And I don't think I actually had anyone pay to come to the event, because it was all like friends, family, personal training clients of mine. I think I had a few people that paid for it. This is like 15 years ago. But the point is that I put it on and I just did it. And it was awesome. And it was great. And then what happened was I ended up getting my first few clients from that. I had gotten a few clients before that when I was going through coaching school. But my first few clients through events is because a couple of my friends, my personal training clients, brought some friends, And when I say a lot of people, I think at the event I had 25 people, which is a decent number. But of the 25 people, there might have been 7 or 8 that were brand new, and the rest of them were people that I knew. But the interesting part is I got a client from someone that was brand new that just met me, but also one of my personal training clients at the time, because I was in the fitness industry, ended up hiring me as well. And that's when I first started understanding the power of live events, because I'm like, well, here's a personal training client of mine, and they knew I was a coach. They knew, they had worked with me for years as a personal trainer. They knew I was going through coaching school, and of course I would tell them all about it. And even sometimes I would even coach them like during the personal training session without them really know I was coaching them. But the point is after seeing me at this event, they saw a different side, and then I made an offer and say, hey, if you're in a position where, you need some help with this, consider hiring me as your coach. I didn't say it like that back then, because I know the hell I was doing like I do now, right? But I found a way, and I let them know I was available for one-on-one coaching, and I followed up with that person and then naturally spoke with them, and it's like, I want to talk to you about potentially hiring you as my coach, and ended up hiring me. So it was a really cool thing. So that's why I started learning about, wow, the power of these live events, right? So that's the biggest thing. And so one of the first tips I'll really give you is, other than starting to understand both types of events, is always do the event. So no matter which event that you have, whether you're showing up to people who are creating events for, setting up events for you, and you're showing up, or whether you're doing your own event. And let's just say, like I remember I did a lot of stuff with health clubs for a while because I was in the fitness industry, right? I got events through my own contacts. So wherever you're starting from, whatever industry, careers, through your personal contacts, their industries, or whatever your connections, that's what you do sometimes. Even if it's not quite within your niche, or if your niche is very well defined, that's another way. If it's very well defined, that you can utilize that to find specific groups that are relevant for you. But even with that being said, is that sometimes you want to, within your own existing contacts or your own experience, leverage those contacts. That's why I did a lot of stuff in the fitness industry. But I can remember doing so many events, and I would, have an event at a health club, and they would promote it for me, blah, blah, blah. And I'd show up in the group fitness room, Or I'd call them the day of and I'm like, "Hi, I'm coming to the event tonight, blah, blah, blah. How many people do you have pre-registered?" And they're like, "I don't know. You might want to cancel. There's only 2 people. There's only 3 people. There's only 1 person. There's 5 people, whatever." And I'm like, "No, I'm going to do it." And I drive 45 minutes or I drive an hour. I drive 30 minutes and I'd show up and there'd be 1 person, 2 people, a handful of people. But you know what I learned is that sometimes I'd show up and I'd drive an hour or so and I'd show up to 2 people. And next thing you know what? I got a client out of it. And it wasn't always the case. Sometimes I'd drive an hour and show up and there'd be 5 people and no one would hire me. But you know what happened and what the benefit of it was? Is I had 5 fans at the end of that and I helped 5 people and I practiced speaking and I honed my message and I was fired up because of all those things. And those 5 people got onto my email community. And you know what I learned is over time is while not all those people hired me then and there, even months or even years after that, but sometimes many years after that, I've had people hire me. Some people that hired me literally 5 or 6, 7 years later in some cases that I remember like, where did this person come from? And I go back to my notes and I'm like, oh, they came from that event. Sometimes I don't even remember who the person was. And I go back to my notes on my email list. That's why we have an email community, as I like to call it, but an email list is, and when we put people in there, we can put little notes, we can tag them. Now it's a whole lot more advanced, not technically meaning hard, but to, make notes of people when we import them to our email communities, like Aweber as an example, what I recommend. It's so we can know who they are, where they come from. And someone, reaches out to me 7 years later who's been on my list getting emails, and all of a sudden they end up hiring me, right? And so now what happens is I've learned the value of staying in touch with that person, following up with that person, and staying in front of that person. And so there is future value in those people. So we always do the event. Like I said, it doesn't matter how far you have to travel and how few people will show up, whether it's your own event or not. As I mentor my mentor coaching clients, sometimes they're setting up events and like, man, this is hard. Like I said, putting people in the seats, if you're doing your own event, is always the most challenging aspect of it. So as we do that, and they're like, oh, I don't know. I think I might cancel the event. I've only got 5 people coming. And I'm like, no. I'm like, you show up and you do it. I don't care if it's your brother or your sister and that's all that's there, or your best friend or someone you had to pay to show up at your event. You do the event because you're practicing speaking, and that's the most important piece right now, especially in the beginning. So aside from always doing the event, is when you do that event, you do it because we got to practice speaking and we never know where it's going to come from. And that's the other thing that I've learned is, I'll give you this another tip, is you never know where it's going to lead to. You never know who's going to show up. You never know who, even if you know who's going to show up, right? You never know how they're going to receive your information, and you're never going to know what that will turn into. So someone shows up and they bring a friend, and that person's brand new, and all of a sudden they listen to your message and they're like, wow, this changed my life, right? So at a minimum, you change someone's lives. And let's say they don't ever talk to you or see you again, or you don't get their contact information, they leave before you can even contact them. It's that ripple effect, right? And I know the technical piece to it, right? But, it's when something happens over here, like you throw a rock into the water, and the ripple effect is like, you don't know what that ripple is, how that's going to affect something else somewhere else. So you don't know how that affected that person's mood, that person's energy, what that shifted inside of them. Then they go home and then they interact differently with their children, their spouse, their whoever, right? And all of a sudden you've changed someone's life. So at a bare minimum, you never know what's going to happen. But in terms of what can happen for your business, you never know what's going to happen, because what happens if that person all of a sudden comes up to you and says, wow, my God, this is fantastic stuff. Great. You know what? Maybe they end up hiring you. Maybe they end up saying like, you know what? I've got a group of people that would love to hear this information. Could we talk about maybe having you come in and speak to my group or this group? Or I know someone else who's looking for a presenter, right? And they're looking for a presenter. And I was wondering if you might come in and then take a closer look at how you might be able to help them. That's how I started up with State Farm. Years ago, I did a presentation in a fitness facility, and one of the women there, they got on my email list, and I remember interacting with her. I remember her name is a unique name. And so I think it was like 3 or 4 years later, and she was on my email list, and she reached out to me, and she's like, hey, Jeff, I don't know if you remember me. I was in one of your seminars like, eons ago, blah, blah, blah. And then, she mentioned her name, and I'm like, yeah, I vaguely remember that conversation because I remember that name. It was unique. And she's like, well, I work with State Farm, And she's like, one of my superiors is hosting an event for his agents, and they're looking for a speaker. And based on what they're looking for, I just think that you would be the perfect person for this. So I wanted to connect the two of you. That ended up being my first real paid speaking engagement. Like real paid speaking engagement, I mean, I got paid, it was $2,300 to do that event. And that was, and then on top of that was expenses going down to Maryland where it was. And so it was awesome. It was awesome. Not only to mention the clients I got from that, book sales, and how that catapulted from there into the other things that I started doing with State Farm. And I did work with State Farm and did stuff for them for 5+ years. Even up until like last year, I still had some clients that came from State Farm events. Either they were agents, friends of agents, or connections from that, and I still have plenty of people that are on my email community, and who knows what that could lead to. But the whole point is we always do the event because we never know who's in the seats, how that's going to impact them, and what that could lead to. And that's why we keep doing these, is because we're broadening our reach, and we never know where that's going to lead to in terms of our future, in terms of our business. And the interesting part about that is it's hard for us, because what we're doing is like, well, we don't know when that's going to happen. One of my first mentor coach years ago taught me something, and he said, you're 2 to 3 contacts away from a 6-figure income. And at the time, he explained it to me, and I understand logically what that meant until it actually happened. And then I understand emotionally how it works. But essentially, those contacts, those 2 to 3 contacts, are people that are your biggest fans. Those are the people with the audiences that they're willing to put you in front of, or they just keep referring people to you, whether it's for clients or speaking engagements, whatever it is. And that then in turn grows your business, because it catapults and expands out from there, 2 to 3 contacts away. And so where do we find those 2 to 3 contacts? Well, we can't predict, well, I'm going to call this person and they're going to be my next contact. No, we don't know who those people are. And that's why we do these events, is because we do these events and we never know who's going to show up. We never know how we're going to impact somebody. Even if like we said, if I know who's showing up, you don't know how that's going to shift their world, or who they're connected to, or how they might see you differently, and then in turn be motivated to kind of show you and push you out there. So those are some of the big tips that I have for you in terms of why we're doing events, and some of the strategies to kind of get you to do them, and also how it leads to more clients. Now, when we go back to the 2 types of events, there's the types of events that, like I said, the events that I actually set up myself, and then the events that we have set up for other people. One tip I want to give you as we start to wrap this up is that don't think of these events as like, oh my God, I have to have these huge events and I've got to plan months in advance. Earlier in the show, I said, you could have something this Sunday. Today's Tuesday. You could have something this Sunday, 5 days from now, at a local Panera Bread or whatever, and you can get 5 people in the room, right? So it's a very casual thing. So when you're going around thinking about, oh, I want to get these people and maybe they can have me come in, just think about, where are people meeting already? Where are there groups of people? Where can I, where would they be excited to have someone come in like myself and talk about topics X, Y, or Z? Even if it's general personal development, you can find people that are getting together and say, hey, listen, I know you got a meeting coming this Friday, or when you guys meet next, would you be open to, would you ever consider having, myself come in as a presenter and talk about the power of mind in terms of what your mindset, in terms of what you're doing, or the top 5 success principles. And I'm talking very generically right now, but obviously I'm trying to appeal to the people listening to this, even if you don't have a specific niche, that, you can do those things. And it's a casual event where you can just show up for even 15 minutes, have 15 minutes. You show up at lunchtime at a cafeteria for their employees, or maybe for their staff, or for their customers. And so we start to find that that's one avenue of doing that. But also it's casual, it's quick, it's 60 minutes or less. We're not charging for it, and we're getting out there and we're speaking. Or the other side, if we're doing our own event, is the same thing, a casual thing, right? Use platforms like meetup.com. Check that out, right? That's just one avenue for starting to invite people to an event. You can also use social media. You can also use your contacts. Get on the phone, call people, make a list, and get people there. Hey, I'm having an event this Sunday. People go to things that are closer, not further away. People go to things that are closer, meaning time frame wise, and they can commit to things that are closer, not further. Meaning, if I get an event in September on the 17th, I don't know what day that is. It's a weekend on the 17th of September. Unless I like love this topic and it's something that, oh my God, I have to go to this event. I'm going to rearrange my whole schedule and make sure that my day is set aside for this event. Unless it's like that, people aren't going to commit to your event if it's too far out. Oh, September 17th, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, you know what? Wait till it gets a little bit closer and I'll decide, right? That's what people do. But if you're doing one in 5 days from now or this weekend, guess what? If people want to go and they know their plans now, or as it gets closer, you can do an event even a couple days out. And get on the phone and call people and use social media and use meetup.com and things like that. And maybe you get 2, 3, 5 people, but you can do an event. In other words, what I learned is, and I started off this way too, is I was trying to do all this planning and I'm going to do an event in 3 weeks from now or a month from now and 2 months from now. And you know what? No one signed up and I didn't get commitments to it until like the last minute anyways. And that's when I realized is people don't commit to things until the last minute. Typically, you're going to get the majority of your signups in 48, if not 24 hours before the event. That's when people are going to be deciding on that. So that's why we don't have to think about it, planning it out so far ahead. And you might be thinking, I can't do something this Sunday. I don't know what I'm going to be talking about. And inviting people, you know what? You'll figure it out. That's my last tip as I'll close this off to say is that planning the event always comes first. Said differently, content always comes last. A lot of people are like, oh, coach, I got to figure out my content. Let me write the seminar. Let me figure it all out first, and then I'll plan the event. That's not how it works. Well, who are you writing the event for? What are you writing the seminar for? Like, you don't even know who you're speaking to or what's going on. It's just like, come up with a topic, come up with a brief description of it, set the day, time, and location, and then promote it. And then once you get people registered, once you get that going, then you can figure out the content afterwards. That's how we plan events. Plan the event first. Content always comes last. Hopefully this has been helpful for you in terms of just giving you some overview, big strategies to help you do the events, not only why we're doing them, but some strategies to kind of get you out there, understanding the 2 different types of events, and also hopefully simplifying the process. The last part I'll just say with all this pieces here is I just kind of want to show you that it's simple. In other words, you don't have to have all this intricate planning and doing this stuff on Eventbrite and registration and blah, blah, blah. It's just like make a list, call people up, get a little registration together, just on an Excel spreadsheet on a pad piece of paper, find a place to go and you're good to go. And that's how we roll with this. Start now. Don't hesitate. The more we hesitate, the more you're missing out on helping people and potentially getting clients.